his life than he was before, and knowing that I'm responsible for that by inviting him to this church, it pulls me to do that with other people, and it's something that I want for everybody in my life.
Isn't that incredible? That's ridiculous, man. That's ridiculous, man. I love Reagan's story so much, and Fred, if you're here last week, we showed Fred's story. I love that because that is a great example of what happens when God's love starts to change somebody. It creates a ripple effect in your life where it doesn't stop with you. It goes on, and it can actually spread pretty quick, which is super cool. So, man, we celebrate that, and we're going to keep showing you stories like that, all right? There is so much life change happening here that we can't make enough videos to keep up with it, but we're going to do our best to do it because I think it's important. I think it's important for us to see and remember that stories like Reagan's and Fred's are happening all the time. And we always want to give you an action step coming out of a video and a story like that. And so I told you last week, the story, the action step coming out of these stories right now is we really want you to consider leading a small group, all right? Because Reagan and Fred both experienced a ton of growth in their group. And I know that some of y'all are like, ooh, I could never do that. I'm no Bible scholar. I'm no theological expert. I can't lead a group. But the truth is you can. Like, leading a group is actually way more simple than you think it is, okay? We really just get together and we ask a couple of questions. What's God saying to you? And what's your next step? And that usually takes up all the conversation for the night. It's not super hard, and we'd love to help you with it. Now, I want to get real with you. Today's a day of real talk, okay? So just buckle up and get ready. I said that to y'all last week, that you should go to peakcityco.com/groups and sign up to lead a group. And we got one person to lead a group. It was a great week. No. But I get it. Like, coming out of COVID, it's hard to commit to things. I get schedules, all that. I just want to take a step further this week and tell you why I really think you should. Some of you have led groups in the past, and I think you should step up and do it again. Some of you are feeling a stirring right now to try it out and to explore it, and I'm telling you, you should. But I want to take a step further and tell you why. In 3 Sundays, on September 12th, it's the first Sunday after Labor Day. It's kind of a fall kickoff day for us as a church. People are back in the swing of school, checking out church. We're starting a brand new collection of messages that day, a brand new series called Death to Religion. And we're going to talk about how the vast majority of our culture believes that religion is actually contributing to what's wrong with this world, right? Like, religion is like the thing, like if religion went away, the world would be a better place. And when you study Jesus and you read what Jesus actually said and what he was all about, you see that Jesus actually agreed. That Jesus actually came to provide a much better way, a much different way that's different than every other religion out there. And so Jesus actually wanted to put religion to death as well. And so we're going to talk about all that. And I believe that it's going to be a series that is going to bring people into the fold. I think we're going to invite people like crazy. Our doors will be wide open. And I think God's going to grow our church during the series. But you know what would be awful? Is if we got all these people indoors and all these people to understand who Jesus is, and then we had no place for them to land in community. Because I'm telling y'all, coming to a service is nice. Like, coming to hear a message and worship is nice. Where you really grow is when you get huddled up with other people and you start processing it and talking about it. And that's actually what makes people stick in a church, is not a message, but actually community. And so that we can prepare for that, I want you to go to peakcityco.com/groups, and I'm trusting that more than one of you will do that today, all right? Now, I want you to buckle up. It's going to be a Real Talk Sunday. I'm so glad, if you're here for the first time, like Joseph said, we're pumped that you're here. And it's going to be an interesting Sunday, and I'm going to tell you why in just a second. We're in a series right now called Build the Future. We're talking about how to, coming out of COVID, how to not look to the past and just try to recreate the past, but instead how to lift our heads up and build a bigger and a better future, both in our personal lives and as a church. And so we put it out there for our whole church about 2 weeks ago. We said that we feel like the future God is leading us to build is a future where we are debt-free and we've reached 2,500 people for Christ by the end of 2025. Debt-free, meaning this building is fully paid off. And the reason for that is we believe God wants us to give more money away externally to serve our city, to serve our state, to serve the world in the years to come than we ever have before. But to do that, we got to pay off this building, okay? And then reach 2,500 people for Christ. We just believe there's no better use of our time or our efforts than to start praying that 2,500 people come to know Jesus in the next 5 years, if heaven was more full and hell more empty by 2,500 people, that'd be incredible. Why did we pick 2,500, you ask? Because it's 2025, 25. Oh, it's just numbers. Help you remember it. I don't know, man. There's no rhyme or reason to it. Let's just put a goal out there and shoot for it. I'll be transparent. There's no magical mystery behind the number. It's just, man, let's put a goal out there and let's pray and let's invite and let's see what God can do. Now, that's a big future. And the way that we're trying to figure out how to build that future is by going through the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah was a man in the Old Testament who had a big dream for the future. His vision and his dream was that he could help lead an effort to rebuild the walls and the city gates around Jerusalem, his hometown. And at this point in history, Jerusalem was in ruins. And so it's nearly impossible to think that Jerusalem could be rebuilt. But Nehemiah has this vision that if we could rebuild it, if we could take on this huge task, every Jewish person who'd been scattered across the world would have a home to come back to. It was a big, big, big dream. But then he goes throughout and kind of lays a blueprint for how he went about building the future and how you and I, in our personal lives and as a church, can build the future. So today, we're going to take out another part of that blueprint. And I had one title for my message. It's not actually the title for my message, but it captures what we're going to talk about today. The title was going to be Not Sexy, But Necessary. Y'all know there's some things in your life. Students in the room, you're just getting there. You're going to hit, like reality's going to hit you in like 4, 5, 6 years. As an adult, there's some things in your life that you must do that are not sexy, but they are necessary, right? Like cleaning your shower. That ain't sexy. It's possibly the most disgusting thing in the world is cleaning a shower. Side note, I have a phobia. I don't have many fears in life, but one of them, I don't know if it's a real phobia. If you could Google it for me and help me, that'd be great. I have a phobia. It is like a fear of not perfectly clean, like ceramic shower tile. Like if it's not perfectly clean, I find myself like subconsciously getting smaller in the shower and just like, I don't want to touch it. It's filthy. It's terrifying. It ain't sexy, but it's necessary. You got to do some things in life that aren't sexy, but they're necessary. And that's what today is, all right? The real title of my message is Give Like Your Future Needs It. All right, give like your future needs it. And I know some of y'all are here for the first time and you're like, did we seriously come to church the one Sunday they're talking about money? I know. And I think you actually picked a great Sunday to come. Because I think that when you hear how a church really views money, it's actually and how a church really talks about money, it's actually one of the quickest ways that you can decide whether or not this place is for you. And I'm so excited to get to share with you a little bit of God's heart behind this and our heart behind it. And man, I'm praying that today just plows through some of your skepticisms about church and about God and about faith and helps you feel more at home here today. And then for those of you that call Peak City home, I'm telling you, man, this ain't a sexy one, but it is necessary, all right? It's necessary. Y'all ready? Let's do it. This is going to be a fun one. I had fun with it first service. And by fun, I mean my pits were sweating by the end of it. Nehemiah 2, all right, if you were here last week, the context behind where we're at right now, Nehemiah has just recently shared with the king of Persia, the most powerful man in the known world. He has just shared with him his vision for the future. That he wants to rebuild the walls in Jerusalem, he wants to rebuild the gate, and he's going to go. Now, last week we kind of left with a cliffhanger because he presents that negative reality to the king, and the king asks him like a blank check question. The king looks at him, he's like, okay, I see your problem, I hear your dream. What is it that you want? And that's a big blank check question from the most powerful man in the known world. And now today we get to see Nehemiah's response of what he asked for from the king. So Nehemiah chapter 2, we're starting in verse 6. It says, the king said to me, what is it you want? Then I prayed to the God of heaven. Remember last week, then I prayed. How many of y'all had some then I prayed moments this past week? Then I prayed. Then I prayed to the God of heaven and I answered the king. If it pleases the king and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city of Judah where my ancestors are buried so that I can rebuild it. And then the king, with the queen sitting beside him, asked me, how long will your journey take? And when will you get back? And it pleased the king to send me. so I set a time. Now, when you read the Bible, pause for a second, you got to understand, if you're new to the Bible, I know what I just read doesn't jump off the page to you. And I get that. Like, truthfully, reading the Bible is kind of an acquired taste, right? Like, if you think when you first start reading the Bible that you're just going to love it, you better think again, all right? Because, like, you got to transport yourself back thousands of years and understand culture. It's an acquired taste. And when we read that with our 21st century Western minds, it don't pop like it should pop. Because what just happened is crazy. Nehemiah just asked the king. Nehemiah is a cupbearer to the king. It's a position of influence. And he just asked his boss, the most powerful man in the known world, hey, can I have like a couple years off of work? And can I still have my job when I come back? You try going into work tomorrow and see how that goes, all right? Go into work tomorrow, go to your boss and say, hey, here's this deal. I got this dream for what I want to build in the future. I want to move to Africa and build these clean water wells for all these orphans. Like, man, I've got this dream for my marriage. My marriage is going to be so much better. Could you give me 2 years off? And you see what he says. Come on, y'all know, like if you're a leader, if you're a manager, if you have employees, you know how hard it is when you have a staff member transition off to go through the rehiring process. I mean, finding good help is the hardest part of leadership. That's hard. But it says, it's so interesting. I want you to hold on to this phrase. He asked the king for this crazy thing, and it says that it pleased the king to do it. It pleased the king. He didn't do it reluctantly. He didn't feel pressured into it. He didn't do it begrudgingly. It pleased the king to send him. I want you to hold on to that. We're going to come back to it, all right? Now, Nehemiah sees this positive response, and he thinks that now is his opportunity to just ask for more. So he just keeps going, and he just keeps asking for things. He's like a child, okay? It says, in the next verse, it says, I also said to him, hey, if it pleases the king, while you're at it, if you're so favorable, if you're, feeling like Santa today, may I also have letters to the governors of the Trans-Euphrates, so that they'll provide me safe conducts until I arrive in Judah. And also while you're at it, I mean, if you're just handing out things, if you're feeling good, may I also have a letter to Asaph, keeper of the royal park, so that he will give me timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel by the temple, and for the city wall, and for the residence I'll occupy. Oh my gosh, Nehemiah is a child here. You know kids don't know how much things cost, right? My 9, I'm about to be 10-year-old son just told me yesterday, he said, hey, one of my good buddies asked me what I wanted for my birthday. And I was like, cool, what'd you tell him? He said, I told him I want a $100 gift card to the Nintendo eShop. I told him I want a couple robots. I asked him if he'd buy me a Nuggets jersey. And I said, stop, what did you say? You're not gonna have any friends. He's like, Dad, I don't get it. Like, you just stick the little plastic card in the machine and you get whatever you want. Isn't that how it works? Oh my gosh, we have so much to teach. Like, kids just don't know how much things cost, right? And so Nehemiah, it's like he doesn't even know, but see, Nehemiah actually knows exactly what he's doing here. Nehemiah knows that time off from work ain't gonna cut it. He knows that if he's gonna build the future, that he's gonna have a lot of help. And so he has a real talk conversation about the resources he really needs, and he puts it all out there. Says, here's what I need. I need you to provide the wood. I mean, make no mistake about it. Nehemiah just asked the most powerful man in the known world, not only for a couple years off of work, he asked him to foot the bill. And he just goes for it. Because he knows that his future actually needs it. He knows that he won't be able to do it without this huge, huge gift, these resources. And the king responds so positively. Look at the next verse. It says, because the gracious hand of my God was on me. Oh man, what a phrase. God, let your gracious hand be on us today. The king granted my request. He said yes. And so I went to the governor of the Trans-Euphrates and I gave him the king's letters, and the king had also sent army officers and cavalry with me. He's like, I'll give you whatever you want. You got it. Whatever you need, the answer is yes. And now, we like to over-glamorize certain parts of faith, don't we? Like, we glamorize preaching and worship leading, like, oh wow, like these people are up to leading worship, like they're so holy, like Like, oh my gosh, like preaching is such like a glamorized, like, no, y'all don't know like how many nervous trips to the bathroom I take every Sunday before I get up there. Like, it ain't glamorous. It's just a thing. It's just a thing I do. It's just a thing like you. Like we glamorize certain aspects of church and faith. Christians do this, but we don't glamorize and we don't appreciate other things. Because like, if the king hadn't said yes, and the king hadn't sacrificed here and given and met the need, if the king hadn't stepped up and done this, Nehemiah wouldn't even be a book in the Bible. It never would have happened. We wouldn't even know his name. We wouldn't have a bunch of weird Christian kids with the name Nehemiah. Naming my child Nehemiah. It's going to do great things. That wouldn't even be a thing if the king hadn't said yes, if the king hadn't footed the bill, if he hadn't given what it took. See, that's a spiritual act. It's actually one of the most godly things that we read about in this story is the king saying yes to this request. And it proves to us a principle that is true in our lives. It's true for our church, and it's true for your personal life. That if you want to build the future, progress requires sacrifice. Progress always requires sacrifice. It's a tried and true principle. You will not move forward in your life if you don't give up stuff. Progress will require, and you know this, we saw this on display just recently like as a culture, right? We saw this in the Olympics. How many of you are big Olympics people? By show of hands, you love the Olympics. Yep, not many of you. I didn't think so. My wife loves the Olympics. It's fascinating to me. It's one of the weirdest things when we got married. The Olympics would come on every 2 years, winter, summer, they alternate. And every time the opening ceremonies come on, she's like watching them for 4 hours and she's just crying. I'm like, what is, like, could you just text me when the USA is supposed to come out? Like, why are we watching the Czech Republic? I just don't get it. Like, I just don't get, it's hard for me not to just kind of sit back and poke fun at the Olympics. Like, y'all seen race walking? If you don't know what race walking is, I just gave you your Sunday afternoon entertainment. Go down that YouTube wormhole. Race walking is a race, but you have to keep one foot on the ground at all times. And so the way you get going real fast is you just move your hips. Bro, you think, I'm about to be a race walker. I mean, these guys and these men, these grown men embrace their inner Shakira, and they just hips. And that's a sport. It's insanity. You can't watch that and not make fun of them. I don't care how good of a person you are. But I get it. I've been married to my wife for almost 15 years now. We've been through our share of Olympics. And so she just loves them. And I understand why. The more I've gotten around her, it's because it just requires such sacrifice. When you get to know the stories of these Olympic athletes and you see how much they have given up to go through and become and achieve, and you see a world record get set or an Olympic record get set, and there's just emotion all over their face, and the parents are crying, and it's because the progress that they made required sacrifice. They gave up so much to get there, right? We see this in play when you look at world history, right? You see the civil rights movement. Progress requires sacrifice. We have grown a long ways as a country in terms of racial justice and racial reconciliation. We got a long ways to go. But the progress that has been made has required sacrifice. Every step of the way. You see it at play with our troops. I know that's a very sensitive topic right now with everything that's happened in Afghanistan recently. But, the sentiment that's being shared online right now and in our community, I think is so good for our troops to hear is that they may feel like all that sacrifice was in vain, but the progress that our military has made, not just in our country, but in promoting peace throughout the world, that progress has required sacrifice. The world is a better place because of the sacrifice that has been made by our troops. Progress requires sacrifice. And I'm telling you, the same is true in your life. If you want to build a better marriage, you ain't gonna get there without giving up something. You won't get there unless you sacrifice. If you have these dreams of getting to a certain college or having a certain career and you're a student, I'm telling you, you ain't gonna get there doing what every other student in your school's doing. That progress will require sacrifice. If you have a dream for your career, of where your business is going, you ain't gonna get there without sacrifice. Progress requires sacrifice. And the same is true, guys. The same is true in our church. Where we are right now, 15 years in, this place doesn't get here right now. We don't get from point A, 15 years ago, this church starting, to now without sacrifice. There are some faithful families that helped start this church, that have been with this church for a long time, who have sacrificed. And I'm talking financially, I'm talking serving hours, I'm talking every way you can think of sacrificing. This church is here because of the sacrifice of those who have gone before us. In fact, there's some of you here right now that you were in the room last year when we said, hey, we think we need to buy this building. And your sacrifice paved the way for progress. Some of you have just been through culture class. And you're seeing right now God change lives, and you are sacrificing financially for that, and your sacrifice is already making progress. Progress always requires sacrifice. And I just don't think, just like we skip over that part for the king, I don't think we appreciate that enough. I don't think we appreciate the fact that you wouldn't be in these seats right now. Some of y'all don't know this. Last December, we said to our whole church, hey, we need new chairs. There's a bigger auditorium, and our chairs are falling apart. We literally need you to help us buy chairs. The chair you're sitting in right now was paid for by someone's sacrifice. And I just don't think we celebrate that enough, and I think we ought to correct it right now. Can we honor and celebrate the sacrifice of those who have gone before us to pave the way for where Peak City Church is today? It's unbelievable, man. We should honor that more. We should celebrate that more. Is just as godly and just as spiritual as anything you see done on this stage. And we'd be crazy if right now I didn't take a part of our service and talk about what that looks like for us as a church, right? We're talking about building the future. We're talking about giving. It'd be crazy if I didn't take a moment and stop and talk to you about like a real talk conversation about where we are as a church financially and what it's going to take to build the future that we're talking about, okay? So I want to do it. I want to have a real talk with you about it. And if you're new, I want to give everybody just kind of three prefaces to this conversation, okay? 3 heads up, okay? One, I recently heard someone say that they think I talk about money too much. And I just started laughing when I heard that. So it's like, I've been here 2 years and I've yet to preach a single message on money. But it never fails. At every church, there's always someone that thinks you talk about money too much. And when I hear that, I just laugh because I'm like, y'all ain't seen some churches out there. There's some churches, like the first church I worked at, y'all, every single Sunday, they'd have an elder in the church stand up and do a 5-minute speech on giving, guilting you and pressuring you into giving, and then they'd pass the plates. And y'all know if you've been in churches, I didn't grow up going to church, but the few times we went, I saw him pass the plate, and I saw the look on my dad's face, and he'd, in a guilty way, pull out his wallet and toss a couple bucks in. I was like, ugh. And the first church I served at, they would pass the plates, and they'd sing a song during it, and the song was almost always, Jesus paid it all. Jesus paid it all to him I owe. No! I mean, I could just feel the throw up coming up. I could just feel it. It's just like a visceral reaction. It's just awful, right? Like, there are some churches, and so I get it. I get the hesitation. I get the nervousness when we talk about money in church, because like, I've been up late at night like you have been and flipping through the channels, and you get to the religious station, and it's like the guy that's selling like bottles of water that's, holy water for $29.99 a month, and it's like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? Like, you just went to your sink and filled up some squirt bottles, and Like, I get it. I get all the skepticism of it. But you need to know the reason we don't do things, like the reason we don't pass plates here is because we're trying to avoid that. We're trying to avoid that, like, when people are coming here to learn about faith, money and the church is an obstacle and it's unnecessary, and so we don't talk about it a lot. We don't pass plates. Most of our giving's done online. Like, we've got a couple of wall boxes in the back of the room. If you really look for them, they're really small and you can put an offering in. So we do that for a reason, but because we do it like that, it requires that occasionally we have a real talk like this. Okay, it requires that occasionally we just like say, here's what's going on, right? Preface number 1. Preface number 2, if you are new to this church and you're just checking things out, not sure if this is home for you, if you're not sure what you believe about God, I want you to know this is more like a family conversation that I'm so glad you get to hear. right? This is not aimed at you. This is not like, that's not what this is. This is for people that attend on a regular basis and kind of call Peak City home. I want you to just kind of listen in. If you want to start giving, that's great, awesome. We'd love to have you in at what God's doing here, but this is not aimed at you, okay? That's preface number 2, which leads me to preface number 3. If you never give a dime here, if you never give $1 to this church, our doors will always be open for you. We will always take your kids and love them and show them who Jesus is. We will always create awesome environments for your teenagers to come to know who Jesus is. We will serve you and love you. You will belong here just as much as anybody else. You don't have to pay a membership fee. It ain't nothing like that. Our church exists for people to come here and have a safe place to discover Jesus and follow him fearlessly. And if you don't give a dime, our doors, this will always be home for you, okay? Now, 3 prefaces. Y'all ready? The nervous, let's go. I'm gonna get real with you. God's doing amazing things here, and the numbers I'm gonna show you right now might surprise you. They don't surprise me at all. It's very normal and average for most churches in our country, okay? I wanna get real with you. The average, or what we need per month to just function, to like pay the bills, pay the mortgage. By the way, the mortgage on this awesome new building is basically the exact same we were paying in rent before. So if you're wondering about that, that was one of the reasons we wanted to move into a building, is because we were paying too much in rent. Colorado Springs is expensive. Some of y'all know that. And it ain't getting any cheaper. Can I get an amen from a home buyer? But the average amount of money it takes, or what it takes to run this place and to fund all of our external partners and all that is $135,000 a month. Okay, $135,000 a month. Normal for a church our size. However, what's given on a month per average here is $115,000 a month. Now, I know what you're thinking. Petey, math. Did they teach you math in seminary? Do you know addition and subtraction? Do you know these things? I do, and you need to know this is actually very normal. The way we make up for this is by a few large gifts from people in our church throughout the year, and really, primarily, it's made up through our year-end offering. Like, we ask people at the end of the year to give generously, and that covers the difference, and we end up surviving. But y'all, like, some of you are like, oh my gosh, sinking ship. Nah, this is just church. This is just church life. The average normal church all across our country, it is constantly in survival mode. Constantly. So nothing about this is like shocking to me, but I pray that it's a little shocking to you. The more shocking stat to me that I want to share with you, that again is actually very normal, but I'm praying that it gives us a little bit of holy discontent, is that there are 700 households that regularly attend this church. And by household, I mean like if you're a single, you're a household. If you're a couple, you're a household. If you're a couple with kids, you're a household. Okay, 700 households that attend our church on a regular basis, which is like once every 2 or 3 weeks. If you ask them what's their home church, they'd say Peak City. About 700 households. However, there are only 175 households that give financially, which is about 20-25% of the total. And again, that's normal. Normal church world is that 20-25% of the people do the vast majority of the giving, and this is why churches are constantly in survival mode. And again, I just want to put these numbers in front of you so that you see what's really going on and you see what our struggle really is, and so that you understand if we're going to build the future, we have to push past this. If we're going to build the future and we're going to pay off this building and we're going to give more money away than we've ever given away, we're going to serve people in need in our city, serve people in need all across the world. If we're going to reach 2,500 people for Jesus in the next 5 years, all that stuff, if we're going to do that, we have to push past this, okay? We have to grow from a teenage church into an adult church. Right? We're 15 years old. It's about time for us to grow into an adult church. And so I want to ask you something to help us get there. All right? I thought about 100 different ways I could take I've been praying about this message and how I was going to say this for about 3 weeks now. And I had some different routes I was going to take. I was going to talk to you about tithing. Right? If you don't know what tithing is, if you're new to church, that's a churchy word. It's the practice of giving 10% of your income to the local church. as an act of, God, I trust you, and I'm wanting to fund the mission and make it happen. It was something that was required in the Old Testament. It is not required in the New Testament. It is not required for followers of Jesus to give 10%. We live under the grace of Jesus. There is nothing you could ever do to earn God's love or make him love you any more or any less. He's not out for your 10%. However, when you read the New Testament, the earliest followers of Jesus, they didn't give 10%, they gave like 100%. They just started like selling their homes. Like when you read the book of Acts, they sold their homes and they brought the money and they laid it at the apostles' feet and they said, go reach people. Let's go. So like the New Testament followers, they were like, man, 10%, that's like a great recommendation, a great starting point. And I love the tithing principle because I do think it's enough for you to feel it every month, but it's not enough to where you can't survive. I was gonna go to that route, talked about that, and I was like, and the more I got into it, I was like, nah. It just didn't feel right. It just felt weird. I was gonna talk to you about my personal story in financial giving. Like my wife and I, and our giving to the church, and I know like some of you might be like, whoa, wait a minute, the church pays you to be the pastor, and then you turn around and you give the money right back to the church? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. No, that's actually how it works. We would never ask you to do something that we're unwilling to do. We would never ask you to sacrifice in a way that we don't sacrifice. And truly, I can say right now, financial giving to the local church has been the most important spiritual discipline in my life. I've seen more spiritual growth from it. I've been rewarded more from it. I mean, sitting back every year with my wife and seeing what we were able to give to fund the local church and to see what God did with it and to see the life change. It's like, man, there's very few things in life where you can actually see your money make a difference. And the local church, you get to see it. Right? I was gonna go down that road and tell you all about like what it was like for me when I first started following Jesus and going to Bible college and reading the book of Acts and like, oh my gosh, these people take giving seriously, and I kind of went crazy with it. I'll tell you the whole story someday. I just didn't feel right. It didn't feel right to tell you all that. Someday I will. And it didn't feel right because of this. We are in such a weird time right now. This is just a weird moment culturally. And you combine that with our church. Like our church, you need to know right now, our church, you're in the midst of a congregation that is all across the spectrum financially. There are people that I pray with every single week who attend this church on a weekly basis who do not know where they're going to live next week. And there are millionaires in this church and everything in between. And that's beautiful. That's how the church should be, right? There are people in this church that just stepped foot in the doors of a church for the first time in their lives in the past month. And there are people who grew up in church and have been there every single Sunday of their lives and everything in between. And that's beautiful. That's how it should be, right? But then you throw all that, the wide spectrum, the wide range, and then you throw COVID on top of it. When people have lost their jobs, they've had to get new jobs, they've had to figure out childcare, they've had to relearn skills. The whole financial world seems upside down. What is going on? You throw all of that together, and I felt like as I was preparing this that it's nearly impossible for me to thread the needle with this message in the right way that you guys will all hear it and receive it. And so where God brought me to is a challenge, a request that I want you to pray about, okay? It's a challenge and a prayer that I think I'm praying will unite us and bring all of us that are across all those spectrums together and enable us to build the future. So I'm gonna lay it out to you, and I wanna explain it to you, all right? So we are asking everyone who calls Peak City home to prayerfully consider giving an additional $100 a month to build the future. All right, we're asking everyone that calls Peak City home to prayerfully consider giving an extra $100 a month to help build the future. Now you can apply that in a whole lot of ways. For some of you, that is impossible. And I want to recognize that that is okay. If you can't do that, do not walk out of here feeling guilty or bad or ashamed. My goodness gracious, you got life circumstances. You don't need to feel bad about that, okay? But for the vast majority of us, this is possible, right? This is possible. And for many of us, this is not only possible, this is easy. That because God has blessed you and you actually have enough, you're able to do this. And so, for you, maybe it's like your household is going to give an extra $100 a month. That would be awesome. For some of you, maybe it's more like what my wife and I are doing. We're going to give an extra $100 a month per adult. We ain't going the whole family. We're going to give $200 more a month as a family. Maybe for some of you, it's like, no, God's blessed us. We can give $100 more per person in our house, include our dog and cat and hamster. I don't know. I don't know, like, I don't care what it is. You take that and you go pray about that and see if you can do that. Because if we can come together around this request and we can band together and change that, like 25% of the people do the vast majority of the giving, if we can change that number, we will have everything we need to build the future. I'm telling you guys, we are not in a spot right now where it's gonna take a king to write a blank check to us to build the future. We're in a position where it is very possible for us to build what God's asking us to build if all of us will come together and sacrifice what we can. So that's the request. The easy way to do it, peakcityco.com/give. That's the way we all set up our giving here. You literally just set up a monthly recurring gift of $100 and you're done. It's super, super easy, okay? Now, everyone take a deep breath. You did it! We did it! Yeah, there's clapping there. You made it through a giving talk. My God in heaven, look at how awesome you are. That was funny seeing it, oh man. Knowing how much sweat was coming out of my pits and seeing how much you were squirming, it's a fun moment. My prayer for you all week long has been that when I say this to you, that you would receive this request and that your heart would be just like the king's heart. That's been my prayer all week long. When Nehemiah made his request, it said it pleased the king. It gave him joy to say yes to this. And I've been praying that that would be your heart. I've been praying that you would see the why behind this and that you wouldn't walk out of these doors feeling, obligated, pressured, none of that. That you'd walk out of these doors feeling like, man, it's the greatest honor of my life to give a little bit more to help our church accomplish what God's doing here. I love how the Apostle Paul writes it in 2 Corinthians. He says this. These are such good words for us to focus on. He says, remember this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. And whoever sows generously will also reap generously. Pause there for a second. That means, what he's saying is if you invest a little bit in what God is doing, you will only feel the reward of it a little bit. You sow sparingly, you're going to reap sparingly. But if you sow generously, you're going to reap generously. That means that when God changes lives, you're going to feel like, I was a part of that. And I'm telling you, Fred's story, Reagan's story, we see it. God's doing things. We got more stories than that. I mean, come on, just 2 weeks ago, my wife and I are out in the lobby. And a woman comes up to us and she says, hey, do you know how I found out about your church? We said, how? She said, because I was an alcoholic and I bought all my booze at the liquor store next door. I remember we used to laugh. I remember it was like one of my punchlines. When I first said, hey, let's go buy this building. It's over on 1710 Dublin. And there's a sex shop at one end and a liquor store at the other. That was my punchline, right? It was funny, ha, 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 right? She said, I found out about your church because I was an alcoholic and that's where I bought all my booze. And now I'm 55 days sober. And my wife said, well, we'll see you on day 62. 7 days later, we'll see you next Sunday. I can tell you about a young woman who we baptized 2 weeks ago who, right before we walked out, and the way we do baptism is like, the band's playing, we're worshiping, it's like what heaven's gonna look like. And like the band's playing their songs, and I know they're on the last song that they prepared. So I'm like, girl, we gotta get out there. And she's like, hey, can I tell you my story of why I wanna get baptized before we do this? I'm like, sure. And I'm like, but like, just kidding. I said, no, absolutely. And she told me her story of sexual abuse and how she's not been able to not think about it until she found Peak City, until she found Jesus here. And she said, Sundays are the one day of the week where I don't think about it because of what God's doing here. And I want to get baptized because I want to be free. Man, that's unbelievable. Man. And when I read that, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. Whoever sows generously will reap generously. and I see what God's doing here, I don't want to see those stories happen in our church sparingly. I want to see those stories happen generously. I want them happening every week. And that's going to require us all coming together in sacrifice. And the progress will require sacrifice. But Paul says it right in the next part. I love this next part because it takes all the pressure off me preaching this to you. He says this. He says, each of you should give what you've decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. You give $100 a month, cool. You give $10 a month, I don't care. You give it that, not my business. You talk to God about it. You decide what you're supposed to give. And you shouldn't give because I pressure you into it. You shouldn't give because I said, hey, we need it. No. You should actually give from a place of a cheerful heart. That God loves a cheerful giver. It should please your heart like it pleased the king's heart to give to this. And you see, the reason that God loves a cheerful giver is because God is a cheerful giver. The reason that God loves when you give joyfully and generously is because God at his core is a joyful and generous giver to you. See, Jesus, when he saw you and I, and he knew the future that he wanted to build for us, he knew that the progress would require sacrifice. He knew that he was gonna have to give of himself to build the future that you and I needed. And so he stretched out his arms and he died on a cross because he loves you, and because he wants a great future for you, and he sacrificed everything. And guess what? He didn't do it begrudgingly. He did it for joy. Hebrews 12 says this, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and he sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. You know what that means? When Jesus looked at the sacrifice that was required, it actually pleased the heart of the king to give up everything for you. And that's the motivation. That's been the Christian motivation for 2,000 plus years now. Our motivation to give financially is not from a preacher's pressure. Our motivation to give is not from a shock of stats. Our motivation is the love of Jesus. And I'm praying that our church just gets filled with that, man. I've been praying all week long that you'd leave these doors just feeling like, gosh, God, you've done so much for me. It is my honor. It's the joy of my life to give to your mission. And so I want to pray that for us. I want to pray that for you. And so let's stand. I want to pray, and then we're going to do what it says. We're going to just sing about Jesus and fix our eyes on him, and let that be the thing that we walk out of here thinking about. All right? Let's pray. Jesus, we trust you. We trust you. You have provided for this church at every step of the way. And we believe you're going to keep doing it. We believe this future you've put in front of us is a future that you want for us. You want even bigger things for us, God. And so, God, we just ask you right now for the resources to do it. God, I pray that you would help us to come together collectively and for each of us to give what we can so that we see stories of life change happen every single weekend. And Jesus, I pray for the heart of our church right now. I pray against any attack of the enemy that might get in someone's mind and make them think some sort of evil way about the church or evil way about money or any of that, God. I pray against any of that. I pray that you would protect our hearts and our minds, and that, God, in these moments, that you would just fill our hearts with love, with gratitude, with overflowing thankfulness for what you've done for us. And let that be the reason that we give, Jesus. God, make the heart of our church a generous church in response to your generous love. And that's a work of your Spirit that we're just desperate for, God. And so we love you, and we spend the rest of this time celebrating you. We're thankful for you, Jesus. We fix our eyes on you.